The Varan fleet moved through space like a dark cloud. 3,000 warships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever shown to the galaxy. At the center of the formation flew the flagship, the Eternal Conquest. A vessel so massive that it could carry an entire army within its metal walls. Ambassador Draven stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, watching the stars pass by. He had left the Galactic Council behind and joined the fleet personally. He wanted to see the humans fall with his own eyes. He wanted to watch their little planets burn. "How long until we reach the border?" he asked. The fleet commander, a Varan warrior named Krath, checked his instruments. "We will cross into human territory in 6 hours, Ambassador. Our scouts report minimal resistance ahead. A few small patrol ships, nothing more." Draven smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Excellent. I want the first human world captured within 3 days. Let their people see what happens to those who speak to the Varan with disrespect." Krath nodded, but there was something in his eyes. A small doubt that he did not voice. He was a soldier, and soldiers learn to trust their instincts. Something about this mission felt wrong. The humans had seemed too calm, too confident. But he pushed these thoughts away. The Varan were the masters of war. No young species could stand against them. On the human side of the border, Admiral Tay watched the approaching fleet on his display screen. The enemy ships appeared as red dots, thousands of them, moving closer with each passing minute. His own fleet was much smaller. Just 50 visible ships arranged in a defensive line. "They outnumber us 60-1, Commander Hanna observed. "In ships they can see, yes," Admiral Tay replied. He looked at the clock on the wall. "How long until they cross?" 5 hours, 47 minutes. The Admiral nodded slowly. "Send one more message. Give them one last chance." Hanna looked surprised. "Sir, we already gave them a warning." "I know, but I want the record to be clear. I want history to show that we tried everything before we acted." He paused, his voice heavy with sadness. "What happens next will change everything. The galaxy will fear us. I want them to also know that we did not want this." The message was sent. It flew across the empty space between the two fleets, carrying simple words. "This is your final opportunity to withdraw. Cross the line, and you will face consequences you cannot imagine. Choose wisely." On the Eternal Conquest, Draven received the message. He read it and laughed so hard that his forearms shook. "Consequences?" He roared. "What consequences? Look at their pathetic fleet. 50 ships against 3,000. They are bluffing, trying to scare us with empty words." Commander Krath read the message again. The words bothered him. They were too simple, too direct. A species that was truly afraid would beg or bargain. These words sounded like something else entirely. They sounded like a statement of fact. "Ambassador," he said carefully, "perhaps we should send scouts ahead. Learn more about their defenses before we commit the full fleet." Draven turned to face him, anger flashing in his eyes. "Are you afraid, Commander? Afraid of humans?" "No, Ambassador. I am cautious. There is a difference. Caution is for the weak. The Varan do not hesitate. We do not fear. We conquer." Draven pointed at the display screen. "Give the order. Full speed ahead. We cross in 5 hours." Krath wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. The ambassador had made his decision. So the commander bowed his head and gave the order. The fleet increased its speed, racing toward the invisible line that separated Varan space from human territory. On Earth, General Minho watched the same display in his underground command center. He sat in his chair, still and quiet, like a stone statue. Around him, officers worked at their stations, monitoring every movement of the enemy fleet. Lieutenant Jisu approached with a tablet in her hands. "General, all defense platforms report ready. The hidden fleet is in position. Captain Yuna's strike wing is standing by." "Good," Minho said. He did not look away from the screen. "What about civilian evacuation?" "Complete, sir. All border colonies have been emptied. The people are safe in underground shelters." The general finally turned to look at her. "And the children? The schools?" Jizu nodded. "All children have been moved to protected zones. Every precaution has been taken." A small amount of tension left Minho's shoulders. Whatever happened next, at least the innocent would be protected. That was something. That was enough. "Sir," another officer called out, "the Varan fleet will cross the border in 30 minutes. Minho stood up and walked to the main display. The red dots were so close now. So many of them. 3,000 ships filled with soldiers who believed they were invincible. 3,000 ships that would soon learn the truth. "Open a channel to all human forces," the general commanded. "All stations, all ships, all platforms." The communication officer made the connection. A small light turned green, indicating that every human military unit in the sector could hear him. General Minho took a deep breath. Then he spoke. "This is General Minho of Earth Command. For 200 years, we have hidden our true strength. We have let the galaxy believe we are weak. Today, that ends. The Varan Empire has chosen to attack us despite our warnings. They think we will be easy prey. They are wrong." He paused, looking at the faces of the officers around him. Young men and women who had trained their whole lives for this moment. He saw fear in some eyes, determination in others. But in all of them, he saw trust. They believed in him. They believed in Earth. "I will not lie to you," he continued. "The enemy is strong. They have conquered many worlds. But they have never faced humans. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know that when we fight for our homes and families, we do not surrender. We do not retreat. We stand and we fight until the last breath leaves our bodies." In space, on ships and stations scattered across the border, human soldiers listened to their general's words. Some held hands with their friends. Some whispered prayers. Some simply stood in silence, ready for whatever came next. "Today, we show the galaxy who we really are," General Minho said. "Not victims, not prey, but warriors, defenders, humans." His voice grew stronger with each word. "When the history of this day is written, let it say that we gave them every chance to walk away. Let it say that we did not start this fight. But let it also say that we finished it." The communication ended. Silence filled the command center for a long moment. Then Lieutenant Jisu spoke. "General, the Varan fleet has increased speed. They will cross the border in 10 minutes. Minho nodded. "Then we have 10 minutes to prepare. After that," he looked at the red dots on the screen, so close to the border now. "After that, there is no going back." In space, the Varan fleet raced forward. Ambassador Draven stood at the front of the bridge, watching the approaching border with hungry eyes. In his mind, he was already planning the celebrations. The parades through conquered human cities. The statues that would be built in his honor. He did not see the danger. He did not understand that the 50 human ships in front of him were not a defense. They were bait. The clock counted down. 9 minutes. 8. 7. On the S resolve, Admiral Tay closed his eyes and thought of his family back on Earth, his wife, his children, his grandchildren. He was fighting for them, for their future, for their freedom. "All hands," he said quietly. "Prepare for combat." The final minutes passed like hours. Every second felt like an eternity. And then, at exactly the predicted time, the first Varan ship crossed the invisible line. The border had been breached. The war had begun, and humanity was ready. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so silent. Ambassadors from 100 different species sat in their seats, staring at the display screens that showed the aftermath of the battle. They had watched the entire fight through long-range sensors, unable to believe what they were seeing. The mighty Voran fleet, 3,000 warships strong, had been reduced to scattered wreckage in just 6 hours. Over 2,000 ships destroyed, 800 captured. The survivors huddled in what remained of their formation, surrounded by human vessels that could end them at any moment. Ambassador Draven was no longer laughing. He stood in the center of the council chamber, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. His fine robes were torn and dirty. His eyes, once bright with arrogance, were now dull with shock and shame. Admiral Tay stood opposite him, dressed in his simple uniform. He looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, and his shoulders seemed heavy with an invisible weight. Victory had come, but it brought no joy to his heart. "The terms are simple," Admiral Tay said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "The Voran Empire will withdraw from all neutral zones immediately. You will return all territories you have taken by force in the last 100 years. You will pay compensation to the species you have conquered and enslaved." Draven's jaw tightened. "Those terms are outrageous. The Voran Empire will never accept such humiliation." "Then the war continues," Admiral Tay replied calmly, "and it will end with the complete destruction of your empire. Your fleet is gone. Your soldiers are prisoners. We can reach your homeworld within a month. The choice is yours." The other ambassadors watched in amazement. This was not how galactic politics worked. The strong dictated terms to the weak, not the other way around. But everything they knew had changed in a single day. The humans, whom they had dismissed as children playing at space travel, had revealed themselves to be something entirely different. On Earth, General Menho addressed the planet through a global broadcast. Billions of people watched as the old soldier spoke from his command center, the display screens behind him still showing the positions of the human fleet. "Citizens of Earth and all human colonies," he began. "Today we have defended our homes against those who wish to destroy us. The Voran Empire attacked without provocation. They ignored our warnings. They believed we were weak." He paused, letting the words sink in. They were wrong. In cities across Earth and dozens of colony worlds, people cheered. They had lived for so long under the shadow of fear, knowing that powerful alien empires looked at them with hungry eyes. Now, for the first time, they felt safe. They felt proud. But General Minho held up his hand, calling for silence. "Do not celebrate death," he said. "Today, many beings died. Voran soldiers with families. Fathers, mothers, children who will never come home. We did what we had to do to survive, but we should not rejoice in the suffering of others." Lieutenant Jisoo stood beside the general, watching the broadcast with tears in her eyes. She had lost friends in the battle, 12 pilots who would never fly again. They had died protecting humanity, and their sacrifice would be remembered. But as she listened to the general's words, she understood something important. Victory meant nothing if it turned them into monsters. Back at the Galactic Council, negotiations continued. Ambassador Draven argued and threatened and begged, but in the end, he had no choice. The Voran Empire accepted the human terms. They agreed to withdraw, to pay compensation, to release all their slaves and prisoners. As Draven signed the agreement, his hand shaking, Admiral Tay watched him with something like pity. The ambassador had been powerful once. He had believed himself invincible. Now he was broken, humbled by a species he had considered beneath his notice. "I want you to understand something," Admiral Tay said quietly, so only Draven could hear. We did not want this. We tried to live in peace. We tried to be good neighbors. But when you threatened our families, our children, our future, we had no choice but to fight." Draven looked up at him with tired eyes. "Why show mercy now? You could destroy us completely. Take our worlds. Make slaves of our people. It is what we would have done." "That is exactly why we will not do it," Admiral Tay replied. "We are not you. We fight when we must, but we do not seek conquest. We want peace. We want all species to live together without fear." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Learn from this, Ambassador. Go home and teach your people that there is another way. That strength does not require cruelty. That power does not demand oppression." The ambassador had no words. He simply stared at the human, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not as an enemy, not as a threat, but as something strange and wonderful. A being who could have taken everything and chose to take nothing. In the days that followed, the galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. News spread from world to world, system to system. The humans had weapons beyond anything known. They had fleets hidden in asteroid belts. They had technology that made the most advanced races look primitive. But what shocked the galaxy more than the weapons was what came after. Human ships helped evacuate Varan survivors. Human doctors treated wounded enemy soldiers. Human engineers assisted in repairing damaged vessels so they could limp home. Where the galaxy expected vengeance, they found compassion. Captain Yuna led a squadron to escort the surviving Varan ships back to their space. It was strange duty. Just days before, she had been killing these same ships. Now, she was protecting them. As they traveled, she received a communication request from one of the Varan vessels. It was Commander Krath, the only senior Varan officer to survive the battle. Yuna accepted the call, curious about what he wanted to say. "Captain," Krath began, his voice rough with exhaustion, "I wanted to thank you for the escort, and for," he struggled to find the words, "for not destroying us when you had the chance." Yuna considered her response carefully. "I will be honest with you, Commander. Part of me wanted to. Your people attacked us. Your fleet came to conquer our homes. I have every reason to hate you. And why show mercy?" "Because hate is a poison," Yuna replied. "It destroys the one who holds it as much as the one it is directed at. I have seen what hate does to people. I have seen it consume entire species. I choose not to let it consume me." Krath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "The Varan have always believed that mercy is weakness, that compassion is foolishness. But your people," he shook his head slowly, "you showed us strength we did not know existed. And then you showed us kindness we did not deserve. I do not understand you, Captain, but I think I would like to." The escort mission continued in silence after that. But something had changed. A tiny bridge had been built between two species that had been enemies just days before. It was fragile and small, but it was real. On Earth, the celebrations eventually faded. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a dramatic event. Children went back to school. Workers returned to their jobs. Families gathered for meals and spoke of everyday things, but nothing was truly the same. Humans walked a little taller now. They looked at the stars with new eyes. So long, the galaxy had been a place of fear and danger. Now it was something else. An opportunity. A challenge. A future they could shape with their own hands. General Minho retired a month after the battle. He had done his duty, and he was tired. He wanted to spend his remaining years with his grandchildren, teaching them about history and honor and the importance of treating all beings with respect. Before he left, He recorded one final message for the soldiers who had served under him. "Remember what we fought for," he said. "Not territory, not wealth, not glory. We fought for the right to exist in peace. We fought for our families. We fought for a galaxy where all beings can live without fear." He paused, his old eyes bright with emotion. "That fight is not over. It may never be over. But I know that you will continue it. And I know that you will make me proud." The message was played at military bases across human space. Soldiers listened in silence, some with tears on their faces. They had won a great victory, but they understood that victory was not the end. It was only the beginning. The reckoning had come. The galaxy had changed, and humanity was ready for whatever came next. The moment the first Varan ship crossed the border, everything changed. Deep in the asteroid belts that surrounded human space, massive doors opened in rocks that had appeared dead and empty for centuries. From within these hidden chambers, thousands of weapons platforms emerged into the light of distant stars. Each platform was the size of a small city. They were covered with weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Railguns that could fire projectiles at nearly the speed of light. Energy cannons that drew power from miniature suns contained within their cores. Missile launchers loaded with warheads designed to tear through the strongest shields. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, alarms suddenly screamed to life. Commander Krath stared at his display screen in disbelief. Where there had been empty space moments before, now there were thousands of new contacts. They appeared out of nowhere, surrounding the Varan fleet from every direction. "What is this?" Ambassador Draven demanded. "Where did they come from?" "I do not know," Krath replied, his voice shaking slightly. "They were not there before. Our sensors showed nothing. Nothing. But that was not all. From behind moons and planets that the Varan had assumed were undefended, human warships began to emerge. Not 50 ships. Not 100. Thousands of them, pouring out of hidden bases like angry insects from a disturbed nest. Admiral Tay watched the confusion spread through the enemy fleet. Their ships broke formation as commanders tried to understand what was happening. Some turned to face the new threats. Others attempted to retreat. The perfect order of the Varan armada dissolved into chaos within minutes. "Open a channel to their flagship," Admiral Tay ordered. Commander Hana made the connection. On the main screen, the face of Ambassador Draven appeared. Gone was the arrogant smile. Now his gray skin was pale with shock, and his 4 hands trembled. "You were warned," Admiral Tay said simply. "You chose not to listen. Now face the consequences." Before Draven could respond, the Admiral cut the connection. He turned to his crew with a face as hard as stone. "Begin the attack." Captain Yuna led the first strike wing into battle. Her ship, the Swift Arrow, was small and fast, built for one purpose only: to kill enemy vessels. Behind her flew 200 fighters, each one piloted by the best pilots humanity had ever produced. "Stay in formation," she commanded through her communication system. "Target their shield generators first. Once the shields are down, the big guns will do the rest." The fighters screamed through space, dodging enemy fire with movements that seemed impossible. Varan gunners tried to track them, but the human ships were too quick, too agile. They danced between laser beams and missile explosions like leaves in a storm. Yuna locked onto a massive Varan cruiser. Her targeting computer calculated the weak points in its hull, the places where a single well-aimed shot could cause maximum damage. She pressed the firing button, and twin beams of concentrated energy lanced out from her ship. The beams struck the cruiser's shield generator. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the generator exploded, and the entire front section of the cruiser was torn apart. Secondary explosions ripped through the vessel as ammunition and fuel ignited. Within seconds, The cruiser was nothing but burning wreckage. "One down," Una said calmly. Thousands to go. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human weapons platforms fired their railguns, sending chunks of metal flying at incredible speeds. These projectiles hit Voron ships with the force of nuclear explosions, punching through hulls like needles through paper. Ships that had survived countless battles were destroyed in single strikes. Commander Krath tried desperately to organize his fleet. All ships formed defensive positions. Concentrate fire on the largest human vessels. But it was too late. The Voron ships were scattered and confused. Every time they tried to form up, human fighters would sweep through their lines, breaking their formations apart. Every time they tried to retreat, they found more human ships waiting for them. On the Eternal Conquest, Ambassador Draven watched his fleet being destroyed. Ship after ship vanished from his display screen, replaced by the expanding clouds of debris that had once been proud Voron warships. He could not believe what he was seeing. This was not possible. Humans were weak. Humans were primitive. How could they be doing this? "Get us out of here," he screamed at Commander Krath. "Full retreat, now." "I am trying, Ambassador," Krath replied, his hands flying over the controls. "But they have us surrounded. Every escape route is blocked." In the command center on Earth, General Mainho watched the battle with grim satisfaction. The plan was working perfectly. Years of preparation, decades of secret building, all leading to this moment. The Voron were learning what happened when they threatened humanity. Enemy losses? He asked. Lieutenant Jisu checked her data. "Over 500 ships destroyed in the first hour, General. Another 300 heavily damaged. Their fleet is in complete disarray. And our losses? 12 fighters lost. 3 damaged. All pilots recovered alive. 12 ships against 800. The numbers were almost unbelievable. But Minho did not smile. War was not something to celebrate. Even enemy soldiers were living beings with families and dreams. Their deaths were necessary, but not joyful. "Continue the attack," he ordered. "But open a channel to their flagship. Give them one more chance to surrender." The message went out. On the Eternal Conquest, Draven received it with shaking hands. Surrender. The Voron did not surrender. In 10,000 years, they had never surrendered to anyone. But as he looked at the destruction around him, he realized that he might not have a choice. "Ambassador," Krath said urgently, "we have lost contact with half the fleet. Our shields are failing. We cannot survive another hour of this." Draven wanted to scream. He wanted to order a suicidal charge, to die fighting like a true Voron warrior. But he thought of his family back home, his children, his mate. If he died here, what would happen to them? "Tell them," he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "Tell them we will discuss terms." Captain Una received word that negotiations were beginning. She pulled her fighters back, giving the remaining Voron ships room to breathe. But she kept them ready. She did not trust the enemy. "Not yet? Is it over?" Her wingman, a young pilot named Doyun, asked through the communication channel. "I do not know," Una replied. "Maybe, or maybe they are trying to buy time. Stay alert." In the silence that followed the battle, both fleets drifted in space. Around them floated the wreckage of destroyed ships, spinning slowly in the void. Here and there, escape pods blinked with emergency lights, carrying survivors who had managed to abandon their vessels. Before destruction, Admiral Tay ordered his ships to collect all survivors, human and Voron alike. Many of his officers protested. The Voron were the enemy. They did not deserve mercy. "We are not like them," the Admiral said firmly. "We fight when we must, but we do not leave helpless beings to die in the cold of space. Pick them up. Treat their wounds. Show them what humanity truly is. The rescue operations began. Human ships moved through the debris fields, pulling Varan soldiers from their escape pods. Many of these soldiers expected death. They expected torture and cruelty, the same things they would have given to human prisoners. Instead, they received medical care, food, and warm blankets. One Varan soldier, pulled from a damaged pod by Commander Hana herself, looked at her with confusion in his eyes. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you help me?" "We tried to destroy you." Hana looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because saving lives is who we are. Destroying you is necessary for our survival. But cruelty, revenge? Those are choices, and we choose differently." The soldier had no response. He simply stared at her as she walked away, his entire understanding of humans crumbling like dust in the wind. Back on the Eternal Conquest, Ambassador Draven sat in his chair, defeated and broken. Around him, the bridge was dark and damaged. Smoke still rose from destroyed consoles. The smell of burning circuits filled the air. He had wanted to teach the humans a lesson. Instead, he had learned one himself. And it was a lesson he would never forget. The battle was over. But the consequences had only begun. 1 year had passed since the Battle of the Border, as it came to be known. The galaxy was a different place now. Old powers that had ruled through fear found their influence weakening. Species that had lived in silence began to speak. And at the center of it all stood humanity, changed forever by the events of that single day. Admiral Tay stood on a balcony overlooking the new Galactic Peace Center, a massive station built in neutral space, where representatives from all species could meet and discuss their differences without weapons or threats. It had been his idea, proposed in the weeks after the battle. Many had doubted it would work, but here it was, floating among the stars, a symbol of hope in a galaxy that had known too much war. Commander Hana joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to the Admiral and stood beside him, looking out at the stars. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "The peace, I mean." Admiral Tay took a sip of his tea before answering. "I do not know. Peace is fragile. It requires constant care, like a garden. One moment of neglect, and weeds begin to grow." He paused, watching a ship dock at the station below. "But I believe we have given the galaxy a chance. What they do with that chance is up to them." Inside the Peace Center, representatives from dozens of species walked through wide corridors, their voices filling the air with 100 different languages. Among them were Voran diplomats, their once proud faces now humble and thoughtful. They had learned painful lessons in the past year, and many of them were still trying to understand what those lessons meant. Former Commander Krath. Now Ambassador Krath walked beside a young human diplomat named Yunji. She was teaching him about human culture, explaining the strange customs and beliefs that made her species so different from others. "You celebrate the birth of every child?" Krath asked, amazement in his voice. "Even those born to poor families? Even those with disabilities?" "Of course," Yunji replied with a smile. "Every life is precious to us. Every child is a miracle. We do not measure worth by strength or wealth. We believe that all beings have value simply because they exist." Krath shook his head slowly. "The Voran have much to learn from your people. We were taught that only the strong deserve to survive. That weakness must be eliminated." He looked at the humans passing by, going about their daily business, laughing and talking with members of species they had never met before. "But I see now that your way makes you stronger, not weaker. Your compassion binds you together. Your kindness creates loyalty that fear could never match." On Earth, Captain Yuna had been promoted to Admiral. She now commanded the First Fleet, responsible for protecting the border regions. But her duties had changed. Instead of preparing for war, She spent most of her time coordinating humanitarian missions, helping colonies in need and training the next generation of officers. One day, a young cadet named Myra approached her with a question. The cadet was nervous, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her uniform. "Admiral, I have been studying the Battle of the Border," Myra said. "I understand the tactics and the technology, but there is one thing I do not understand. After we won, why did we not take Varan territory? We could have expanded our space by hundreds of systems. We could have become the greatest empire in the galaxy." Admiral Yuna smiled at the young cadet. It was a good question, one that many still asked. "Come," she said, leading Myra to a window that looked out over the academy grounds. Below, cadets from many different species trained together, learned together, became friends together. Do you see them? Humans, foreign, and a dozen other species. A few years ago, that would have been impossible. The Varan would never have let their young train beside ours. Other species would have been too afraid. Myra nodded, still not understanding. "We could have taken their territory," Admiral Yuna continued. "We could have built an empire based on fear, like so many before us. But empires built on fear always fall. The conquered always hate their conquerors. They wait for moments of weakness, for chances to rebel. Such empires spend all their strength holding on to what they have taken, and eventually they collapse under their own weight." She turned to face the cadet directly. "We chose a different path. We showed the galaxy that we were strong enough to win, but wise enough to show mercy. Now, instead of subjects who hate us, we have allies who respect us. Instead of slaves who plot our destruction, we have friends who stand beside us. Which do you think makes us more powerful?" Understanding dawned in Myra's eyes. "I think I see now, Admiral. Our strength comes not from what we take, but from what we give." "Exactly," Admiral Yuna replied. "Remember that, cadet. It is the most important lesson you will ever learn." At the Galactic Council, major changes had taken place. The old system, where powerful species dictated terms to weaker ones, had been replaced. Now every species had an equal voice. Decisions were made through discussion and vote, not through threats and force. Many of the old powers resented these changes. They whispered in dark corners, plotting ways to return to the old ways. But every time they tried to organize, they found themselves opposed not just by humans, but by dozens of other species who had found their courage in the shadow of humanity's example. Admiral Tay addressed the council on the anniversary of the battle. His speech was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by trillions of beings of every shape and size. 1 year ago, he began, we were forced to defend ourselves against aggression. We did not want that fight. We did not seek it. But when it came, we faced it without fear. And we won. He paused, letting the words echo through the chamber. But victory in war is not the same as victory in peace. True victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into friends. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of ambassadors from species that had once feared or despised humanity. We have spent this year building bridges, healing wounds, creating opportunities for all beings to live in dignity and freedom. That work is not finished. It may never be finished, but I believe, with all my heart, that it is worth doing. Commander Hana, watching from the audience, felt tears on her cheeks. She remembered the day she had transmitted Earth's final warning to the Varan fleet. She had been so afraid then, so certain that dark times were coming, and dark times had come. But they had passed, and in their place was something she had never dared to hope for, a galaxy beginning to heal, a future worth believing in. After the speech, there was a celebration at the Peace Center. Music played, food was shared, and beings who had been enemies danced together under the light of distant stars. It was not perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still moments when old hatreds threatened to surface. But there was also laughter. There was hope. There was a sense that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could be better than it had been. Admiral Tay slipped away from the celebration to stand, alone on the observation deck. He was tired, more tired than he had ever been. The past year had taken everything from him. His energy, his health, his peace of mind. But looking out at the stars, he felt it had been worth it. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find an old friend standing beside him. It was General Minho, drawn from his retirement by the anniversary celebration. "You did well, old friend," Minho said quietly. "You gave the galaxy something precious. A chance to change." Admiral Tay smiled wearily. "I only did what any human would have done. We protect what we love. We fight for what is right. And when the fighting is over, we extend our hands in friendship." He looked out at the celebration below, at the dancing figures of beings who had learned to trust each other. "This is who we are, Minho. This is what it means to be human." The two old soldiers stood together in silence, watching as a new era began to unfold. The galaxy had received Earth's final warning. It had faced the consequences of ignoring it. And now, against all odds, it was finding its way toward peace. Some would say it was a miracle. Others would say it was simply the inevitable result of courage meeting compassion. But whatever the explanation, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. And humanity, once dismissed as weak and insignificant, had shown everyone what true strength really meant. The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Hundreds of alien species sat in their seats, their eyes fixed on the small human who stood alone in the center of the chamber. Admiral Tay was not a tall man. He was not big or strong. But when he spoke, his voice filled every corner of the massive room. "The Varan Empire has one chance," he said. "Pull your ships back from the neutral zones. This is not a request. This is Earth's final warning." Laughter broke out among the council members. The Varan ambassador, a creature with gray skin and 4 arms, stood up from his seat. His name was Draven, and he had conquered 12 star systems in his lifetime. He looked at the human with amusement in his dark eyes. "You speak of warnings?" Draven said. "Your species has been among the stars for less than 200 years. The Varan Empire has ruled for 10,000. What exactly do you think you can do to us?" Admiral Tay did not smile. He did not show anger. His face remained calm, like the surface of still water. "I am not here to argue," he replied. "I am here to deliver a message. You have 30 standard days to withdraw. After that, there will be consequences." More laughter filled the hall. Other alien ambassadors whispered to each other. Some shook their heads. Others made sounds of disbelief. The humans were known throughout the galaxy as a strange species. They were emotional, unpredictable, and surprisingly clever. But they were also young and weak compared to the great empires. Draven waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "Go back to your little planet, human. Tell your leaders that the Varan do not take orders from children." Admiral Tay nodded once. "I understand your answer. I will report it to Earth Command." He turned and walked toward the exit, his boots making soft sounds on the polished floor as he reached the door. He stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "Ambassador Draven," he said quietly, "I hope you change your mind." "I truly do." Then he was gone, back on the human flagship, the ESS Resolve. Admiral Tay walked through the long corridors toward the command center. Crew members saluted as he passed, but he barely noticed them. His mind was heavy with thoughts. He had done his duty. He had delivered the warning. But he knew what would come next. Commander Hannah was waiting for him on the bridge. She was a young woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. She had grown up on a colony world near the edge of human space, and she had seen what the Varan did to planets that refused to submit. Her family had barely escaped with their lives. How did it go? She asked, though she could already see the answer on his face. They laughed, Admiral Tay said simply. He sat down in his chair and looked at the stars through the main window. They think we are joking. Hannah's jaw tightened. Then they are fools. Perhaps, the Admiral replied. Or perhaps they simply do not know any better. The Varan have never faced a real threat. They have always been the strongest. They cannot imagine a universe where that is not true. On the communication station, a light began to flash. Hannah walked over and checked the incoming signal. Her eyes widened slightly. Admiral, we are receiving reports from the border. The Varan fleet is moving. They are not withdrawing. They are advancing. Admiral Tay closed his eyes for a moment. He had hoped it would not come to this. He had prayed that the Varan would see reason. But deep in his heart, he had known they would not. How long until they reached the line? He asked. At current speed, approximately 22 days. The Admiral stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned with cold light. Somewhere out there, millions of Varan soldiers were preparing for war. They believed they would crush humanity like they had crushed so many others before. They were wrong. Send a message to Earth Command, Admiral Tay said. Tell General Minho to begin preparations. And contact Captain Yuna. I want the first strike wing ready to move at my order. Hannah hesitated. Sir, if we activate the defense network, there is no going back. The galaxy will see what we have been hiding. I know, the Admiral replied. That is exactly the point. For 200 years, humanity had played the role of the weak newcomer. They had traded with other species, learned their languages, studied their technologies. And all the while, they had been preparing, building, waiting. The other species thought humans were primitive. They looked at Earth's small fleet of visible ships and laughed. They did not know about the weapons hidden in asteroid belts. They did not know about the defense platforms buried beneath the surfaces of moons. They did not know that every human colony world was protected by technology that would make their greatest weapons look like children's toys. Earth had never wanted war. Humans preferred peace. They preferred trade and cooperation and friendship. But they also remembered their history. They remembered the countless times their own kind had underestimated enemies who turned out to be deadly. They had learned, through thousands of years of blood and fire, that peace could only be maintained through strength. And so they had built their strength in secret. They had waited for the day when someone would test them. Now that day had come. Commander Hannah sent the messages as ordered. Across human space, encrypted signals flew from ship to ship, from station to station. Officers opened sealed orders that had been prepared years ago. Engineers ran final checks on weapons that had never been used. Pilots climbed into fighters that most of the galaxy did not know existed. On Earth itself, in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Korea, General Minho received the Admiral's message. He was an old soldier with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and lost many friends. He did not want more death, but he understood that sometimes death was necessary to protect the innocent. So they crossed the line, he said quietly. His aide, a young lieutenant named Jisoo, nodded. Yes, General. The Varan fleet is advancing. They will reach our territory in 3 weeks. General Minho stood up and looked at the giant display screen on the wall. It showed the positions of every human ship and station in the galaxy. There were many more than anyone outside Earth Command knew about. Activate Protocol 7, he ordered. And may God forgive us for what we are about to do. Lieutenant Jisoo's hands trembled slightly as she entered the commands. She knew what Protocol 7 meant. She knew that when it was over, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Far away, on a small patrol ship near the border, Captain Yuna received her orders. She read them twice, then looked at her crew. They were young, most of them, fresh out of the academy. They had trained for years for this moment, but training was different from reality. "Listen up," she said, her voice steady and strong. "The Varan are coming. They think they can take our homes, our families, everything we love. They think we are weak." She paused and looked each crew member in the eye. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The crew straightened in their seats. Fear was still there in the backs of their minds. But now there was something else, too. Pride, determination, the knowledge that they were fighting for something worth fighting for. The warning had been given. The line had been drawn, and Earth was ready.